Today I want to talk to you about using your time well. By using your time well, what I really mean is using your time productively and strategically. At the start of your illustration career, you're either moonlighting from your day job, in which case your time for illustration is very limited, or you're straight out of college with no day job and you have nothing but time. In either case, you're probably not getting hired much. In the latter case, you will run out of money quickly. So while you may have your days and nights free to pursue illustration full time, the clock is ticking. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. If you work in a day job, you have money and security, but as I already mentioned, you have a lot less time to work on your portfolio. Doing it this way will mean it takes you longer to make progress, but there's less risk. If you have limited time to work on your illustrations, it is very important that you use your time wisely and get the most out of the short time you have available. If you're going into illustration full time, equally, you can't afford to mess around. Literally, you will run out of money. You have to be as productive as possible in order to get your first paid commissions. And this, in theory, is the quicker way to becoming a professional illustrator, but it's higher risk, and realistically, it's just not a possibility for a lot of people. Most people will have to have at least a part-time job. It's also very easy when you have a lot of time for something to waste that time. Parkinson's law is something I read about years ago and I have found to be absolutely true in my own life. Tasks expand to fill the time you allow for them. And what that means is I could give myself 1 hour to write a couple of thousand words on a subject and I can do it. But if I gave myself 3 hours to write the same amount of words, it would take me 3 hours. So where does that time go? Well, most likely it's checking my phone, looking at Instagram, playing with the dog, a few trips to the fridge, maybe I'll do some stretching, read a few articles online, decide what I'm having for dinner, make a cup of tea, make another cup of tea. Mostly insignificant little diversions, but they really add up. So if you're going full time, it's very important to be strict with yourself and put a time limit on your projects. Checking your email, gathering some reference images for an illustration you're planning, sketching it out, that could take 20 minutes or it could take all afternoon. It's good practice to get into setting yourself a shorter time limit than what you think you need for a project. And that will serve you really well when a client comes knocking in the future and they want something delivered in 48 hours. It teaches you to be selective and to cut out non-essential distractions. If you have 4 ideas for an illustration, but you've only got 30 minutes to sketch it out, you've got to pick the best and cut the others without too much thinking about it. When you're at university, you're given the time to experiment and explore different options, but that probably won't be the case for your professional career. There's plenty of good books on productivity out there and lots of techniques you can try out and use. Reading a couple of those books would definitely be time well spent. Here are a few of the techniques I apply to my own life. I could talk about this for a long time. I really enjoy this kind of thing, probably more than any reasonable person should. If you want to share some of your favourite productivity tips, share them in the comments. I'd love to see them. As I mentioned before, I set myself time limits for projects and even just daily tasks. And this stops them taking longer than they should and it stops me wasting time. I check my emails at set times. I don't have my work emails set so they just roll in whenever. I have to manually download them at a time that I choose. So if I'm working on another project, I know I'm not going to be interrupted by an email. My job is mostly emailing though, so I'm still checking fairly frequently, but I choose when it's convenient for me to look at emails. And I think this tip would be particularly useful for an illustrator. You could potentially cut your email check-in time down to 2 or 3 times a day, leaving you long interrupted periods of time to actually be creative. That one change revolutionized the way I work a few years ago, and I went from being overloaded to never really feeling like I'm too busy. As a result, I can do a hell of a lot more in my day. Following on from that, I use the Pomodoro technique occasionally if I find myself with a large workload or I need to get through a big project. The idea of this one is that you set a timer for 25 minutes and you concentrate 100% on your task for that 25 minutes, and then you take a 5-minute break and you repeat that. I have a terrible attention span generally, but even I can manage 25 minutes of uninterrupted focused work, mostly. I use a to-do list app that's on my computer and on my phone, so whenever I think of an idea or something I need to do or an idea for a video, I can add it there and then. I'm currently using Todoist, but I've tried out a lot and they mostly have similar functions. You can use the free reminders app on an iPhone very well for that kind of thing, and set reminders for locations too. So a reminder to buy paint would go off on your phone next time you're at the art supply shop, for example. I would love it if I could just rely on my memory, but I can't. And whatever app or system that you use isn't really as important as actually sticking to one system so you can really rely on it. I'm so into testing out different things that I've got notes for various projects and ideas spread across like 5 different apps, not to mention real life notebooks, and that's not useful. So do yourself a favor, pick one and stick to it. That's a few things that you might want to look into for productivity's sake. It's not as interesting to everyone as it is to me, but it's definitely worth everyone at least giving it some consideration. There are many, many more techniques that I apply to my life and apps and bits of software that I use that I won't go into here, but for a creative person like you, really the best thing about looking into this kind of thing is that it can make the boring, repetitive daily tasks faster or automatic, ideally, leaving you much more time and brain space to spend on the fun parts and the creative parts. Whether you're moonlighting or diving into illustration full time, I hope we can agree that the shorter the time it takes you to get from no work in your portfolio to your first commissions, the better. Productivity tips and things like that are all very well, but before all that, you've really got to commit and focus. If you're doing it in the evenings, be consistent. Even if it's only an hour a day, stick to it. Pick a schedule that you can stick to. Don't say you're going to work 3 hours a night if you can't realistically keep it up long term. If you're going full time, go full time. Put in a real shift 5 days a week. Treat it like a real job. It's hard to do that when you're not being paid for it, but if you only do 4 hours a day, it'll take twice as long to get where you're going. So what do you actually do with your time before you've got your first commissions? Well, everybody is going to be starting from a different level. If you've done art college or university, then hopefully you're on your way to developing your technical skills and a unique style, but maybe not. Here's what I think the process and order of priorities should be, regardless of your education level. First, you're working on your technical skills, doing some Skillshare classes, or life drawing, or learning Photoshop, or Illustrator, or whatever it is. It's only really once you build up your skill set that you can start applying those skills to developing your own style. For any of these skills that you're learning, give yourself a specific project to do with a specific goal. Otherwise, you run the risk of wasting time experimenting with no real aim. Experimenting is important, essential in fact, but I think it should ultimately have a goal. You can learn to be an expert at Photoshop or Illustrator or any software, probably even drawing from YouTube these days. I have no doubt about that. The way I use YouTube personally is mostly for specific things I'm trying to do. If I want to learn how to clean up background noises in my audio, for example, I can pretty much always find a specific video that tells me exactly what to do. The advantage of platforms like Skillshare or Domestika or Udemy or Creative Live, I'm sure there are more, are that the quality of the teaching can be better, or more curated at least. You can get a whole in-depth, start-to-finish course on illustration, which is probably a bit more difficult to do on YouTube. Not impossible. Skills might include more than just illustration skills too. Business skills, communication skills, finance skills. They're all going to be very valuable to you as a freelancer. Learning new skills will go on and on all through your career, or it should. But once you've got some baseline skills, then you need to be applying them to something that is uniquely you, blending your skills together into something that's your own style. So you might switch from doing the projects you find on Skillshare to setting yourself projects. And there's a lot of room for experimenting here, and it will take time. It has to. You can't find a unique style quickly. You've got to try a lot of things out. I'm not an expert in this creative part, so if you can find somebody who is, it might make your life easier. Don't be too hard on yourself if you have some off days in this part and you don't feel productive or like you're making any progress. Enjoy the process of trying out things that don't work, because it's not wasted time, it's learning what not to do, and that's still useful information and experience. In terms of projects that you set yourself, be strategic here too. Don't just do the same thing every time, because that's not how a freelance illustration career will be. Set yourself some long projects and some short projects. Give yourself some interesting restrictions, like Maybe you have to make an illustration using only 3 colours. Or you could sketch out an imaginary magazine layout with a really unusual space to put your illustration in, so you have to make it fit into a weird shape. I think it would be useful at this point to start thinking about the commercial appeal of what you're making too. It's very easy to get into making work that you like when you're experimenting here, but if you can, you should try and think about what a client might like. So, what kinds of illustrations do clients use? You see all kinds of things in magazines, from bold cover illustrations to small spots or icons, maybe a portrait of the writer of a regular column, some interesting typography on a double-page spread. Maybe there's some illustrations integrated with photography in the magazine somehow too. What about a subtle background pattern on one of the spreads? And in a magazine there's bound to be some conceptual illustrations too for difficult to understand ideas. That's a real mix of stuff you could try out, and that's all just in a magazine. I've talked about this before, but if you head to an illustration agency website and look at their search categories, the subjects they show on their website are not picked by accident. They're picked because clients are regularly searching for those subjects. So you can refer back to that and use it as a checklist for your portfolio. Have you worked on any illustrations that could be suitable for food packaging? How about a bus shelter advertisement? How about a book cover or a logo or a tequila advert or a medical patient care leaflet? What about illustrated instructions for how to use a particular product? Look around at what illustration is being used for and make work that could fit into those areas. Don't just make what you like. I don't know how long it's going to take to develop a unique style. I never managed it. It will probably evolve over years and years and years, but there will be a point early on, hopefully, when your work is good enough to get you hired. You might not know when that is, so you've got to test it out. Try to get feedback from industry professionals. If you get a sense that you're ready, send your work out. Send your work out to some other illustrators, see if you can get some feedback, but also start sending it out to potential clients. If you start sending your work out to potential clients for a couple of months, let's say, and you don't hear anything back, that's probably a sign you need to focus a bit more on the strategy and the creative part and add some more work to your portfolio. So you go away and you do a bit more work, make some new illustrations, and then you try again. Send your work to more clients and see if you get any bites. Now, if you can get some good feedback from people that know what they're talking about and a couple of promising replies from potential clients, that's a sign you're on the right track and you're making progress. You shouldn't stop developing your work and making new work, but you could start spending more and more time finding and contacting potential clients at this point. Maybe that's an hour a day at first. The rest of the time you're still illustrating new things strategically. Before long, you'll get a bite and someone will hire you. That's when you've got the validation that your work is good enough. At that point, you should be spending more time getting in touch with potential clients. You know at this point that your work is good enough to get you hired, so that should be your main focus. You can't realistically do that all day, every day though. It would be incredibly boring. But maybe instead of an hour a day, it's 3 hours a day. That's 15 hours a week. And if your work is good enough to get you hired, and you spend 15 hours a week hustling for work, you'll make some serious progress. So you know how to make work strategically. And if you watch my video on how to find clients, you also have a strategy for that. There's nothing aimless in what I'm talking about here. Everything has a goal and a strategy to get there. There's no guesswork, just hard work. The last part, where you're making new work half the time and contacting clients half the time, is a balance you'll have to work out yourself. If you're not getting enough attention from clients, do a bit more creative work for a couple of months and reassess. Once you've got your first few projects, things will start falling into place because clients will tell you which parts of your work that they like the best. Or if they don't, you can ask them, and you can use that feedback in the next illustration that you make. There's nothing easy about this process, but that's all it is, a process. You start at the beginning and you go through the steps until you get to the end. No guessing, no time wasting. I wish you the best of luck with finding your first clients. It is not easy. A lot of people give up before they get to the goal. I did. If you can make it, you have my deepest respect. To recap, here are the 4 stages. Skills first, then style. Then you use that style to make new work strategically. Then you're contacting clients. You do those things in order, but actually you don't stop doing any of them, ever. You should always try to learn new skills. Always try to evolve your style. Don't ever stop creating personal work, even if you're busy with paid work. And you always need to be hustling for your next job. I hope this is useful. Give me a thumbs up if it is. And if you're wondering what's different about me, I had a birthday and I was feeling a little bit old. So I shaved my stupid face and instantly became 10 years younger. Well, 5.